I am the representative of the Czech majority in the region, if I may say so. Still, I got some problems with the definition that Polish cross-border cooperation is problematic or the bad thing. It's not. You know, the cross-border cooperation should be about the cooperation between the communities living on the both sides of the borders. And even this, so to say, Polish cooperation in our region fulfills the criteria of the cross-border cooperation. So I would not be so skeptical about that. I led several discussions with the Czech head of the secretariat who told me, come on, we simply cannot support Polish projects because this is not what is the Interreg for. I don't know, look, just the opposite. We should do so because this is about the mainly micro-project scheme. It is about meeting people from both sides of the borders. So, and then I really can agree with the famous Martin Klaas thesis that cross minorities can really serve as the bridge to the cross-border cooperation. Just context, where is this funny, strange regions you have heard so much about? So now we are somewhere under the map in Belgrade. This is Czechia, this is Slovakia, this is Poland, this is Vienna. Our funny region is more or less here. Yeah, you saw this map a million times today. You know, it's very funny. When I thought about us, the various scientists using this map, we mostly came to the maps which are made in Polish. I was thinking, why the hell is that? Why we don't have the more Czech maps with the Czech names for the municipalities on the Polish side, because also those exist. And then I realized it's very simple. Because for the Poles, this kind of the loss of the Czech part of the territory is much more painful than for the Czechs. So to start with the history, and you know the background. So the territory was really divided after the short conflict by the international arbitrage by 1920. It was also, these were the years more or less where these famous Schleswig referenda were held in Danish-German borderlands. And you know, as you know, that was the consequence of the Versailles system. And I didn't know that before I started to cooperate more closely with my Polish friends, that in Polish there is a fantastic description of the post-World War I Czechoslovakia as the child of fortune of the Versailles system. In Czechia or Czechoslovakia, we don't use this. You know, in this national historical narrative, we just got what we deserved, and maybe these bloody Poles got more what they deserved. So, you know, this is always about the history and the histories. As Martin edited 2 years ago, this Regional Federal Studies special issue on the cross-border cooperation as kind of the reconciliation tool. This was exactly one of the conclusions of this special issue, that the problem of quite many cross-border regions is that we don't have one single history, but we have got our individual narratives, which are still alive under 100 years, so which is really quite amazing. This artificial division of the region happened in 1920, and as both Artur and Joanna mentioned, this happened according to the industrial line, according to the railway between Bohumín and Žilina, which really sentenced that the nicer, more historical part of the region got the part of the Poland, and then the more industrial part got part of the Czechoslovakia. This is what made Artur and myself being the Czechoslovak citizens, and for the Joanna the other way around. What are the populations that use? And now the numbers which were mentioned by Joanna and my numbers a little bit differ, because she mentioned that there are around 100,000 Poles living in the whole region. So let me explain what is the difference. So the difference is that firstly, these 26,000 people really declared being the Polish, having the Polish nationality, ethnicity during the last population census in 2011. Quite frankly, there are more of them living there, but as in Czechia we don't ask people, it's not mandatory to fill in the nationality which is something different than the classical context in the nationalities. We are referring to it in the English context. So then only 26,000 people declared this affiliation, which is really dramatic drop. So this is the geography. This is the geography based on the statistics. So it's not about the perception, because so the departure point, like 1920, and the division is more or less okay. Some Poles and Czechs, and then the number of Poles, you know, it drops constantly as it comes to the assimilation, whereas the number of people declaring the Czech nationality rises. It rises also because after the Second World War, this region was called the industrial heart of the Czechoslovakia. So quite many people from the other regions of Czechoslovakia came there to be employed in the heavy industry, like the coal mining and the steel factory. So that's why. However, this changed the face of the region. And now what happened? So the Polish minority experiences really dramatic population decline, and this has got several practical consequences. So the first consequence is that in this part of the region there are established the network of the elementary and just now 2 or 1.5 secondary school with the Polish language as the language of instruction. So these are the schools which are run according to the Czech educational system. However, the students' third language over there is Polish, and the Czech is taught as the first foreign language. This means the graduates of these schools are fantastically fluent in both of these languages. And if I were the minority, which I am not, so then I would send my children also to the Polish schools, because they've got the smaller classes and they get one language practically for free, which is a fantastic asset for the life. And you know, they are grown up in the context of the multilingualism, which makes for them the teaching, the studying of the foreign languages much easier than for the majority one language only population. And this is now the big problem, because at the moment the current number of the Polish pupils attending the Polish schools in the Czech Republic is just slightly below 2,000, which is, let's say, something over the half of the size it was 30 years ago, which is a problem. And these schools are the crucial elements which keep on maintaining the element of the Polishness over there. If the schools cease to exist and they are closed based on the demography, and as the more people declare their Polish nationality, Polish affiliation, then according to the Czech legislation, the more Polish schools will be cancelled or merged with each other, and then the process of assimilation will speed up. It's very simple, it's probably the way it will be anyway. And there were kind of the elements of the non-territorial autonomy came into game. And this was really kind of an interesting example. Ivana already mentioned the examples of 2 big NGOs which safeguard the Polish interests in Czechia. As she said, so whereas the first, this cultural one, Polish Association for Culture and Education, is something which was in place also during the communism regime. So it's in the eyes of many people over there is somewhat discredited by the cooperation with the regime and coexistence. The other one, Congress of the Poles, is kind of the baby of so-called civic society. Even the chairman himself, or vice chairman, Mr. Šimeček, calls it as it's like Václav Havel, child of civic society in the Czech Republic. So it was really established as the pure kind of the articulation of the needs of the civic society. So this was really non-territorial autonomy done by the civic society. This Congress of Poles became an umbrella organization of all the other Polish NGOs, plus interested individuals, Poles living in Czechia, and they really became quite a serious partner for the Czech authorities. The last organization I am going to mention in this context is the Pedagogical Center for Polish Minority Schools, which is a little bit different story. Well, this is the body which is established and funded by the Czech Ministry of Education with task, please guys, take care for these Polish schools, provide them with the methodical support, provide them with the in-service training, because we believe it's quite an important issue. And what happened? As I told you, as I showed you the statistics, so the elites of the Poles living in Czechia are aware that if they don't act somehow, so the Polish minority in Czechia will be over quite soon, will be totally assimilated. What they did is they established their own financial instrument, which is called Zaolzie Development Fund. As Artur and Joanna both mentioned, Zaolzie is the Polish term which is used for this region on the Czech side, inhabited by the Polish minority. This was kind of the fantastic success, because the local business people representing the Polish minority decided to dedicate their own money, part of their money, to keep the Polish element over there. So this is really, they established their own fund with their own specific mechanisms. This fund really comes just from the private sources of the local entrepreneurs, which makes it even more impressive. Moreover, what they also did, they drafted the strategy of the development of the Zaolzie until 2035, and this strategy was about to describe the measures how to avoid the total assimilation of the Poles living in Czechia. These are like the basic elements upon which is the strategy based. So what is the most interesting is focus on three issues. First, education. Education is the key. The second, accent on the language plus using the local dialect, is po našemu, kvara, also in the everyday life. And the last would be the promoting the concept of our Euro-region, whole Czechia, as a small homeland in Europe, which is quite unique because it has got its own Euro-regional dimension. So it also envisages like the higher level of communication of the minority members with the majority population, because it's true that for quite a long time both communities have been sharing one territory, just not with each other but next to each other, which is probably the case we all know from the other contexts. Last two slides. What are the tools which are now the Polish minority organizations doing to, let's say, prevent on their own dissolution and assimilation? So they are quite good in doing cross-border cooperation. As I told you, I would not consider the cross-border cooperation between the Polish minority organizations on the Czech side and the Polish organizations in Poland as non-CBC. It is a CBC, and it's really, they are now trying to be more inclusive. Then I am myself the example that the cross-border cooperation over there in the region is really not just between the Poles on the Czech side and Poles on the Polish side. And as I'm representing an NGO which is co-founded, founded absolutely by the Czechs. From all of us are Czechs, more or less, if we can say that we are Czechs in this territory, which is somewhat questionable anyway. But still, it works quite well. So this is not an absolute truth. So not all the cross-border cooperation is initiated by this. Then, as Artur and Joanna mentioned, so there is actually no real irredentism or the kind of the proto-diplomacy observed in the region. You know, the people are relatively quite okay with the fact that they are the Polish minority living in the Czech Republic, because for most of the time in the socialist regime, Czechoslovakia and Czechia was always a little bit richer than Poland, so economically it was, let's say, more profitable to live over there than in Poland. And moreover, the representatives of the Polish elites got really important people within their community. So they enjoyed the feeling of being the president of the Polish minority in Czechia, who just met the president of Poland arriving to visit Czechoslovakia or Czechia for the official visits. This was kind of quite funny for us locals, yet it counted to some extent. So then, I think that what is important is what happens in the next population census in 2021. I think that despite all the efforts, so the number of people who will declare their Polish origins or the nationality or the affiliation will not increase dramatically, which means that it will result into further reduction of the children in the Polish schools. So then it may slow down the process of the assimilation, but it will probably not stop it. As I told you, what is the good example? It's really application of non-territorial autonomy. As Artur said in his presentation, both Czechia and Poland are, from the point of view of ethnic composition, very homogeneous countries. We are very boring. We don't have many minorities. We've got just one language there, so the Czechs speak Czech, the Polish speak Polish. Before both world wars, the situation was different. There was like 30% of people in Czechoslovakia were either Germans or the Hungarians, so they spoke different languages. And the interwar Czechoslovakia was the country where the four languages met and were quite regularly used. Then, after the Second World War, this situation completely changed, and we are boring, homogeneous Czechia who just speak Czech. So, God thanks for the Poles being in our territory, that it's little bit, at least little bit funny and colorful. The non-territorial autonomy was applied by these civic society organizations in this establishing this fund of Zaolische development. This was really an example which I don't know whether something like this exists in other border contexts in Europe. I don't know, and I would like to learn that. And then another thing is that this non-territorial autonomy concepts were also applied actually by the public organization. This pedagogical center, which was established to cater for the needs of the Polish minority schools in Czechia, is established and fully financed from the Czech Ministry of Education, and yet from the Czech public money, and asking after the direct demand of the Czech Ministry of Education, they implement the projects which are coming, which are getting close to the majority and minority organizations. This is very nice, and as Joanna mentioned, so these actually Polish minority organizations over there are in quite of a luxurious position, having both financial funds from Prague as well as Warsaw, because Poland is quite famous for, let's say, generous supporting the minorities in Lithuania, in Czechia, and basically everywhere. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, sorry for retaking this Czech-Polish issue for the third time. Good news is, when I had a look on the program, it was for the last time. So, thanks for your attention.
Thank you.